Welcome to Old Mutuals on the Money. Today we're talking two-pot retirement system. What is this two pots all about? Is it two pots? Is it three pots? You're going to learn about pots today. But I can't do this on my own. We're joined by Acton. Michelle is our Retirement Reform Executive at Old Mutual. So welcome.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here.
It's always awesome to talk to you because you talk about two pots like, I don't know, it's in your blood. Why is it important for us to save for retirement?
So that's a really good question. And I think, to be honest, what most of us don't realize is one of our biggest assets we have is our salary every month, right? So you working and you earning an income. At some stage in your life, you're going to get to the stage where you're no longer earning that income. And unfortunately, even after that, you've still got water and lights to pay, food, to transport, all of those costs to come through. And so the idea of saving for retirement is so that when you get to the stage, whether it's 60 or 65, and you want to stop working or no longer able to earn an income due to health reasons, then you at least have an income producing asset, which is essentially your retirement fund. So the main aim for saving for retirement is trying to replace the income you earn while you're working when you're retiring, so you don't have to work until you're 70, 80 or 90.
So in other words, while you're working, you are working for your money, but when you retire, the money must work for you.
Exactly. Well, if you're smart, it works for you while you're working, because of course one of the big things is part of what you earn, you need to put away so that when you reach retirement, you can live on that income.
That's right. This buzzword on two-pot retirement system, what is this all about?
So what it's trying to do is really make our retirement fund serve two purposes. Okay, so we know for the vast majority of working South Africans, if you work for an employer, for example, you're putting money away to a retirement fund. However, what we find is happening is when you change jobs, you end up cashing out your pension, which a lot of people do, and then start saving from scratch. But doing that, what doesn't happen is you don't end up working for a lot longer. You're just reducing how much you've got saved for retirement. So the one thing Two Pot's trying to do is prevent people from doing that. Yes, it's a person's money. Yes, it's their savings, but absolutely they need to use it for retirement. So the first reason for bringing in this system is to try and increase what we call preservation, or lengthening how long you're saving for your retirement. The other aspect is what we've also seen is, as mentioned, a lot of people who are working, their biggest asset they own, or the only savings they have, is their retirement fund.
That's right.
There's no others. And if anything COVID taught us, it's that we have the need of some sort of emergency savings just in case for those things that we haven't quite prepared for. And COVID was a great example. None of us could have predicted it. None of us could have foreseen the financial impact it would have had on families. And you don't want a situation then where people have to resign from their job to access their pension fund money, because then it puts you in a worse situation because you still need to work. So what it's also doing is enabling some more frequent access to a portion of your retirement savings that you can access while still working without the need to change jobs. So it's trying to do two things: increase preservation on the one hand, but also ensure greater flexibility on the other.
I like what you said earlier, that, if you're smart, your money can actually work for you while you're still working. Which brings me to the next question about a replacement ratio. Again, another buzzword that tends to be used by people who advocate saving for retirement. What is a replacement ratio?
Sure, that is a term that we seem to throw around, but not everyone fully understands. So replacement ratio is a way we're trying to simplify the ratio of how much you earn after retirement with what you earned before. So let me give you an example. If you've done the maths and you work out when you retire, you need to get in an income of 7,500 Rand a month. And that's how much you need to cover your rent and your food and some luxuries and medical or whatever it is. Then that's the number. If you were earning 10,000 Rand when you retired, then of course 7,500 Rand of 10,000 is 75%, right? And that's basically then says you're aiming for a replacement ratio of 75%. And that's an important part of retirement planning, right? Step one, you and I, if we sit down and do retirement planning, it's hard because we've still got so many years to go to retirement. But essentially you want to give an estimate of saying, right, how much would I need at retirement compared to how much I earn now? And that gives you a feel of what we call replacement ratio. And we know on average we talk about a replacement ratio of 70 to 75% is what you're targeting.
Yes.
I.e. you don't necessarily need to earn as much as your full salary in retirement for a good number of reasons. But for some people that might be as low as 50 if the kids are moving out and your house is paid off, etc.
Yeah.
And for others it might be as high as 100% for those that might have started having kids later in life or etc.
Yeah.
So I think for every person it's a different number, but it's important as an individual to understand what your replacement ratio should be so that you've got an idea of what you need to be targeting.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, ideally, on average, you need to at least retain 70% of your last paycheck. That's what your retirement should be able to buy you to replace your salary in order to maintain the same standard of living.
To maintain the same standard of living, yeah. Absolutely,
okay.
yeah.
All right. So now let's go to the mechanics of the 2 pots. Some people say it's 3 pots, others say it's 2 pots retirement system. Is it 3 pots? Is it 2 pots? What's the story?
Is it 4 pots? Is it 5 pots? It depends how you interpret it. So I think at a very, very high level, the new system is bringing in 2 new pots.
Right.
Okay. And I can go in detail on what those 2 pots are, but just as a very high level, we've got what we call a savings pot and a retirement pot. So those are 2 new pots that are starting. It's all part of the same fund. So think of it more of an accounting element of splitting money, but it's all still part of the same retirement fund.
Yes.
You're not changing retirement funds. Money's not moving. It's just an element. However, the third pot is your existing savings. So what happens with the new 2-pot system is the first step is that it says whatever you've got saved up to September, that money, let's say you've saved 250,000 Rand in your retirement fund, that goes into what we call your vested pot, which is your old money. It's sitting there, it's ring fenced. Okay, that's your one pot. And then, of course, you've got 2 new pots for future money. And those become, that's why we talk about 3 pots, but your third pot is your existing money, and the 2 new pots are what the system brings in moving forward.
So put simply, it's actually 2 pots. One is your savings pot, the other one is your retirement pot, right? Now, people are excited about the 1st of September because that's where officially government is going to permit people to be able to access their pension. But how much can one access from the 1st of September?
Okay, so if we go back to the conversation of our 3 pots.
Yes.
So what will happen on the 1st of September, step 1, is all your existing savings will go into your vested pot. Okay, so that's the first part. Then the second part will be 10% of your money, capped at 30,000, will be transferred out of what you've saved into, as an opening balance, into your savings pot.
Right.
Okay. And then what will happen is post that at the end of September, say for example your first month contributions go in, and 1/3 of your contributions will now be allocated to the savings part, and 2/3 of your contributions will then be allocated to your retirement part. So the money is going to be split from an accounting perspective. Again, as I said, the sum of the 3 pots is how much you've got saved towards retirement. Now, the idea is when you reach retirement, what's in your savings part will be your lump sum at retirement, and what's in your retirement part will be your income. That's used to secure. So we were discussing that replacement ratio of 75%.
Yes.
That's basically what your retirement pot will secure you. So your money going forward is split 1/3, 2/3 into these 2 pots.
Right.
So now you ask me, what about what can I access from September?
Yes.
And I think the first thing to note is it's probably not going to be on the 1st of September because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of admin stuff that needs to happen before, and system changes that need to be done before one can access. But once that is all done, essentially whatever's in a person's savings pot, they will be able to access once per tax year with a minimum amount of 2,000 Rand. So if we go back to that example I was mentioning earlier, in your starting value or your saving vested amount you've had up until now, let's say it's 250,000 Rand. Okay, 10% of that, capped at 30,000, will be transferred as an opening balance.
Right.
So that means in your savings pot on day 1, effectively, you will have 25,000 Rand sitting there, which you can access.
25 or 30?
25. Remember the example I used was 250,000 Rand.
Yes.
If we go to the example where you might have saved R1 million up until now, then 10% capped at 30,000 means that 30,000 will be moved into your savings pot.
Right.
So now you've got your amount of money in the savings pot. essentially you can come forward and access that at any time. So if you decide you want to access it in September because you have an emergency in September, then of course the amount of money in that savings pot will be there. But over time, if you don't and you leave it there, over time you'll add more contributions in there, and that savings pot can become quite sizable, that you can access it, whatever's in that pot, at any time.
Okay. So what happened to the contributions before the 1st of September? Where does that money go?
So that will be sitting in what I like to nickname your old money, right?
Yes.
Because what will happen is at the end of every month, for example, or if you're part of a retirement annuity, whenever you had put your money in there, it gets allocated. So all of that will be part of your balance. Any contributions before September will be part of your savings balance as at the 1st of September. So that will all go into what we call your vested pot.
Okay.
And all the old rules still apply to the old money.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's really, really important to remember. So earlier I mentioned that people change jobs and they can cash out their pension. For this vested pot, those rules will still apply. It's only the new money where we split 1/3 into the savings pot and 2/3 into the retirement pot, and the retirement pot you cannot access until you reach retirement at all. So the only part of you can access moving forward is what's in your savings pot. But bearing in mind, if there's nothing in your savings pot, there's nothing to access. So it's important to keep that building up. But also whatever's in that savings pot becomes your lump sum at retirement. So if you've got an empty savings pot at retirement, you also don't have any lump sum at retirement.
Okay, there's one person we haven't mentioned about, who's got a vested interest in everything that's happening. I know people are excited about being able to access their pension or a portion of their pension from the 1st of September. What about the taxman?
Unfortunately, like we know, what are the two certainties in life? Death and taxes. So essentially, whatever contributions go into your retirement fund, though that money is essentially gone in tax-free, right? Because it goes in before you pay tax on your salary.
That's right.
So it's what we call tax deductible, or you get a tax deduction. And at the moment, I think you can put up to 27.5% of your salary into a retirement fund to claim that deduction. Now, so the money's gone in there, it's invested tax-free, lovely, it's getting dividends or not taxed. Nothing is taxed while it's in that fund. Now, essentially then what happens is if you want to take that money out now, of course, SARS wants back the money that you'd saved when it went in. So any money coming out of your savings pot will be taxed at your personal marginal tax rate.
Okay, just walk us through that tax table, the marginal tax rate that you're going to have to pay. You'll have to pay.
So essentially, if you look at a tax table, it talks about how much you earn, and then it talks about, based on income brackets, what tax rate you need to pay. And the more you earn, the higher your tax rate is. So an entry-level marginal tax rate for someone earning just below 227,000 Rand a year is about 18%. However, if you're earning a lot more than that, that marginal tax rate could go all the way up to 45%. So essentially, it's important for you as an individual to assess what is your annual income, and based on that, you'll be able to see what your marginal tax rate is.
So which means when you withdraw this money, taxman is first going to be taking their portion before you get it.
Absolutely. And there's probably going to be a transaction fee charged. Right? Just like when you go to the ATM and draw money, you get charged an ATM fee. There is, of course, a service you're doing here. So essentially, yes, step one is if you say you want to draw the money, we need to take the admin fee, and then, of course, go and ask SARS, how much tax do we need to pay? Because the other challenge is if you have outstanding tax with SARS for whatever other reason, they can also take it from this money. As they normally can do from your retirement fund.
I'm wondering, now that we're saying that, what happens when a person is owing maintenance money and they are trying to withdraw can that be tampered with?
Okay, so if you've got a maintenance claim and it's submitted to the fund has an obligation in order to pay out against that. And so if the fund is busy processing that maintenance claim, then while that is happening, you also won't be able to access your savings pot claim.
Can I withdraw money from the savings pot and then later on decide, okay, maybe I got a bit of money or maybe a bonus? Can I transfer a lump sum back into the savings pot because I withdrew the money some time ago?
So you've got to think about it like absolutely you can put more money in, and we encourage that, especially if you have bonuses or additional income.
Yes.
One of the best places to put it is in your retirement fund. However, you won't be able to directly put it into your savings pot. It will go into the fund, and any money going into the fund will be split 2/3 to your retirement pot, 1/3 to your savings pot. So if you put 30,000 in as a lump sum, 10,000 will go to the savings pot and 20,000 will go into the retirement pot.
Okay. So because the savings pot, which is made up of 1/3 of your contribution, if you keep withdrawing from your 1/3, what is the disadvantage of withdrawing that money when you retire?
Sure, it has a massive impact. So there's a couple of things. So essentially, every time you're withdrawing, we all know, we talk about that 75% replacement ratio, right? And I mean, rough numbers say you should be putting about 15% of your salary away every month for your working lifetime, and that should get you your 75%. However, it assumes that the full 15% goes in and gets invested and stays there until retirement. If you keep in the long term accessing that savings pot every time you can, you're basically dropping what that replacement ratio could actually be. And so, yes, it affects your lump sum. So a lot of people, when you get to retirement, one of the big things they do with their lump sum at retirement is to settle outstanding debt, finish paying the bond, go on a fancy holiday, whatever it might be. But it's a really good, important kickstart to get started into your retirement. If you have nothing in your savings pot and you've only got money into your retirement pot, then you can use that to secure monthly income, which is great, but that's all you're going to get. There's going to only be a monthly income. So I think the one thing is, if you keep accessing your savings pot, you won't have any lump sum. But the bigger one is you're just going to make your chances of being financially secure in retirement so much worse.
Yeah. So there are some savvy people out there who've been saving either through a retirement annuity. Others have even, they have preservation funds. So supposedly I have 5 RAs, or maybe 4 RAs and a preservation fund. Come 1st of September, does it mean I can literally access, let's say, assuming that you've got minimum of 300,000 in each RA, or including a preservation fund, does it mean I can actually access up to 30,000 per retirement contract?
Absolutely, it does. So essentially, each of these changes, especially with the seeding, are per contract level.
Yes.
So for every fund you've got or contract within a fund you've got, they'll be doing the seeding and you can access, which is great because it means for somebody who's been saving for a long time and has a decent amount saved, they'll then have a really healthy emergency savings that if they don't touch, nothing changes for them, right? Everything continues, the money's still invested, you still earn investment return, and you continue leaving it. But if anything did happen, it means they could either access from one or many of them if they needed to. Yeah.
Okay. So what about those who have turned, or who would have turned 55 years by the 1st of September? Will the two-pot system impact on them in the same way it would impact anyone?
If you're over 55, and that means you can retire, okay, but you haven't retired, then you're an active member of the fund. It will not, it will impact you for everybody. So essentially this two-part system is automatic. So you don't have to do anything. You don't need to tick a box to say, I want to be in or not. It's automatic for everybody except a very small group of people. And this small group of people is essentially those who were over 55 on the 1st of March 2021, who were part of a provident fund at that stage and are still part of that same fund.
Okay.
Those individuals will know who they are because they've previously been communicated when the old annuitization law changed in 2021.
Yes.
And they will be given a choice, do you want to move into the two-part system or don't you?
Yeah.
Except for that group, for everybody else, members of retirement funds, they will be automatically included.
Okay. So how does the two-part system impact on public servants who are on the government employee pension fund? So are they affected the same way, or are there differences there?
They are affected the same way. So the legislation is impacting the GEPF as well. As I said, all funds in South Africa are going to be impacted, or retirement funds. So they will also have that same concept of having the two parts, the savings part and the retirement part, and the 1/3 and the 2/3. The only difference is the fact that the GEPF is what we call a defined benefit fund. So if you're a member of a fund that's what we call a defined contribution fund, it basically means you put contributions in, and your benefits that you get out at the end of the day is a sum of all your contributions plus investment return, right? It works like a really sexy, tax-efficient savings account. However, a defined benefit fund, which is how the GEPF works, is a lot more complicated than that, because it's your benefit you get at retirement is not based on how much you've contributed, but it's based on your length of service and your salary at retirement. So they've got a concept which called pensionable service in a DB fund. And so with the split of 1/3, 2/3 going forward for the GEPF, that split will be 1/3 of your pensionable service accrual will be allocated to the one and the other. So at the end of the day, it'll have a similar impact on members. They will be able to access on a regular basis. They will have a once-off allocation to the savings pot of 10% capped at 30,000 for initial. But how the formula will work and how it'll impact them will be slightly different, because if somebody goes and withdraws money out of their savings pot in the GEPF over time, it will reduce their pensionable service for when they get to retirement and ultimately need to get a retirement benefit.
Okay. So does the two-part system affect people who are married in community property versus people who are married out of community property? Does it affect them differently?
No, it doesn't have any impact from that aspect. I think when it comes to the two-part system, it looks at you as a member, and of course your retirement fund is an asset to you. So I suppose the different types of marriage has very little impact on how the two-part system is going to work. Maybe it's if that marriage dissolves, that could be a different conversation.
Then which takes me to the next question. Is there any impact on people who are in the process of divorcing?
And not really. So essentially, remember what I mentioned, the sum of those three parts is your total value. And if you are going through a divorce, one of the first things that you do is, of course, you list all your assets. And for both the spouse and the non-member spouse, they'll have listed of what their retirement fund is at a total amount, not how much is in each of the parts. And essentially what happens during a divorce proceedings, once it's finished, is they'll decide how to split the assets. And very often, your retirement fund becomes part of those assets that are split. So if somebody gets divorced, and let's say, for example, the question is we need to give 50%, or it says a 50-50 split to the non-member spouse, then essentially half of your retirement fund has to be taken out and paid after tax, of course, and paid over to that individual or the ex. Currently, that's how it works. Of course, it will be based on one amount, and how it works in the new world is it'll be split equally. So if you've got money in your vested pot, your savings pot, and your retirement pot, all three of those will have 50% taken out, so that overall. So the net impact
it's the same.
It's going to be
it's
exactly
not that money
the same.
is taken from different parts, but it's the same.
I think the only important thing to remember about divorce is we're going into a world now where we're used to being able to access some of our money. However, if you've got divorce proceedings pending, you need to tell the fund about it, because if they don't know, they don't know. And then the other thing is, while that divorce is being processed, you won't be able to access that savings pot, because of course we need to keep it frozen until the divorce proceedings are finalized. But other than that, it's going to be exactly the same as it handles currently.
Okay. There are people who are worried about resigning. They're thinking, if I resign before 1st of September or versus resigning after 1st of September, what's the impact?
So that's the beauty of this vested pot, right? So remember I mentioned earlier that you're going to have all your existing savings at the moment. So let's go back to that example I was using of saying you've got 250,000 Rand. If you resigned beforehand, you would be able to take all of that money out in cash. Now that money is then ring-fenced into what we call the vested pot, and the new world talks about a savings pot and a retirement pot, but that's for future money. You will always keep this vested pot. So if you resign after the fact, then the rules for this vested pot are still exactly what they were before. So you will still be able to take all of this money in cash. The difference for the resignation rules is applied to what happens in your savings pot and your retirement pot, which are slightly different rules compared to what you used to be able to do for your vested pot.
Okay. So let's take a scenario of two people. One is accessing their 1/3 every year, and the other one doesn't touch it until they retire. So at the point at which these two individuals retire, which one of the two is going to be better off?
In very simple terms, it'll be the person who didn't touch their savings pot all along.
Yeah.
And it's going to be for two reasons. As I mentioned earlier, first they'll have the other person who doesn't access will have money sitting in the savings pot. And those savings pots are going to be built up to be very sizable amounts if you leave it and let it be invested. So if you haven't had an emergencies or you've got other emergency savings plans and you haven't needed to touch it, number one, you'll have that piece, you'll be able to take a lump sum. But the other benefit is if you take money out of your savings pot while you're still working, you will need to pay marginal tax rate, right? Which is quite a high tax rate when you look at that tax table we were referring to earlier.
Yes.
But when you reach retirement and you take your lump sum out, then all of a sudden it becomes your retirement tax tables, which lets you take the first 550,000 Rand tax-free.
Yeah.
So remember what I said earlier, the money going in hasn't seen the tax man, it's getting invested tax-free, it's earning return with no tax. And then if you leave it till retirement, you get the opportunity to take it out with the first 550 tax-free. That's a massive benefit.
I think you touched on something important there. So when you retire, the first 550,000 is tax-free, right? But if you are going to access your 1/3 of your savings pot, that 550,000, does it apply or doesn't apply?
Not if you're accessing it while you're still working before you retire.
So that doesn't apply.
Doesn't apply.
So which means you are actually paying the taxman because you are accessing the money before the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Final question. If you were to give maybe your top 3 tips to people who are saving towards retirement, what would that be?
So I think the first thing is do what I like to call a health check or financial health check. We were discussing replacement ratios before and how much you need. Often people think just because they're a member of a retirement fund and they're having a deduction from their paycheck, they're all fine, right? They're saving enough. And what we find for a lot of those individuals is they get to retirement and they realize, why have I not got enough? And part of the reason was they might not have been contributing high enough, So what's really important is it doesn't hurt, and it's not something you have to do often. But every 5 years or so, have a think, how much will I need at retirement? There's a lot of calculators on the website. Speak to a financial advisor. How much should I be contributing? Okay, I'm at the right level. So just check. That's the first thing. The second thing that's really, really important is to not access your money while you're working. I know there's this belief it's my money and I need it now. But I interview and speak to many people after they've retired. And the messages that comes through are always the same. If only somebody had told me not to touch my money before. How am I going to survive? Because the job market for 65 and 70-year-olds is not great. There's an absolute need to depend on family members and families for support. So it's really, really important you don't access, because you might need it sooner, but you are also going to need it when you retire. That's one of the sad things in South Africa at the moment, is part of the problem with us having such a high social security dependency is that our old age state grant is just over 2 grand. That's 2,000 Rand. So if you don't save for yourself, that's basically all that you've got as a safety net, which for a lot of people it's not enough. It really isn't enough. So I would say that the second thing I would tell people is please try and do everything you can not to exercise. And the third thing is you're going to hear a lot about 2 pots over the next while, right? Read it. Keep yourself up to date. There's a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions around how it's going to work, how much you're going to be able to access, etc. So it really becomes important to empower yourself with information around it so that you're able to make a judgment call. And try and stay away from accessing it, that savings pot, unless you really need it, because I think the power of an emergency is such that you will be able to lean on something you've saved to help you get through it. And it's not something that should happen annually or frequently. It's something that should be a once in a 10-year event type thing.
Wow. Michelle Acton, thank you so much. Thank you. That was very insightful. And I look forward to our next conversation, maybe post 1st of September, when things are really happening. We'll see. Maybe the people who are accessing their pods will tell us something after that. But thank you for joining us.
Thanks, John. It's been fun.